What's up, No Nation? This is Jesse from Plant to Spear, joined by my co-host Michael. Michael, I think we might have a decision to announce, my friend.
I
I
think
think
so.
I think you need to respect our decision,
That's
and
right.
Florida State is going to hit the portal and get out of the ACC.
Let's
Of course,
go.
guys, we don't know what's going to happen in the long run, but we're here to talk about this Board of Trustees meeting that went on this morning, Friday, December the 22nd, depending on whenever you're watching this. Michael, there was a lot to talk about, man. They definitely did not hold back in this. They said a lot of important things. Of course, there's a lot of legal stuff that you're going to always have to unravel, and this is not going to,
Right.
nothing legal ever happens overnight. So it's going to be a long, drawn out process. But we're going to talk about this from a few different angles. Obviously, I think we need to first say here that we are not lawyers. This is not any kind of
Correct.
legal whatever. This is
Mumble.
not
Yeah.
official. Exactly. This is just two Florida State guys talking about what we took away from this meeting. So to start with, Michael, how are you, my friend? Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Jesse, thanks for having me back. Have me again. Love being on here. Also, man, so great to enter the college football conference transfer portal. Let's go and see where we end up. But yeah, like you said, we're not lawyers. We don't know much. We don't live in this world all the time. We've done some research, and so we're going to give you guys just kind of our opinion based on what we understand, as well as what we've read, and just try to make sense of it all. And at the same time, it's important for everyone to know. And Jesse, you talked about this. This is just a first step.
Yep.
We're a long ways of officially being out of the conference. I think Florida State has until August of this year to let them know if they're not going to be participating after the 2024 season. And so the earliest Florida State could leave is 2025 right now. So we have a long way to go, but this is a very important step, which we're going to get into today. Super excited for it, though.
Definitely. And you know what's funny, man? You actually make a really good point there. Maybe, now listen, let's put on our tinfoil hat for a second.
Okay.
Let's go a little deeper. Maybe Mike Norvell didn't want to overpay for these recruits. Maybe we haven't been aggressive in the portal because we know we're totally getting screwed by the conference next season.
Correct.
So we're not really going to be able to win much of anything with these ACC refs because it's going to be our last year in the conference. So maybe. But of course, that's tongue in cheek, guys. But so what we're going to start out with was I did watch the meeting, and my transcribing skills aren't the greatest, but I was able to at least take some notes because I try and pay attention more than anything. And so I just want to run through a couple of my notes, and then I'm gonna from the meeting and watching it, and then we're gonna talk about some research that Michael did on the subject, and then we're also gonna kind of give our thoughts in closing on why Florida State's doing what they're doing and why they should be doing what they're doing. So first off, the one thing that was very much addressed in this meeting was that under Florida sunshine law, it forces them to do these meetings publicly.
Yep.
Everybody thinks that they're doing these like posturing and things like that to grab attention. And they were not shy. The president and the director, they both said, like, listen, we would 100% rather do this behind closed doors. We do not want to do this out in the public. But, unlike the ACC, who doesn't have any transparency, it is Florida law. So they have to do this out in the open. So that is the first thing to understand. This is not Florida State looking for attention or media or clicks or anything like that. It's just following the law. And then a couple of other big points that were really addressed in this was the ACC adding these three teams. That's something that obviously they voted against. They were not happy about. They did not pull any punches when they said that they bring basically no value to the conference. They're great academic institutions, but they don't bring much by the way of sports. They talked about how in the past, Florida State has been able to make up the small revenue gap that was around $7 million or so.
Wow.
And projecting what's going forward, you're going to be looking at 30 million-ish in gaps, and that's going to grow. I mean, we still haven't seen the Big Ten and the SEC renegotiate their contracts fully.
But it's coming.
Right, with the new addition. So those numbers are probably going to go up. I mean, we just talked about a couple episodes ago where the SEC just signed a $3 billion media rights with ESPN. So they talked about, this is not a reaction to the CFP. That was a really big, narrative in this where it was more like this investigation has been going on for a year. They've been working on it for over a year. This is not a reaction to the CFP. And the reason that's important is because they're like, the revenue gap is going to grow. And so we can't just sit around and be expected to make up $30 million in revenue. Florida State does really good at generating out of TV contract revenue, but you can only bridge that gap for so long. And if it gets to 30 to 50 million even in the future, I mean, you're going to be really, really far behind.
So
Yeah, and so I'll kick it to you on this, but so it sounds like, obviously what they're going to do here is they're going to challenge the grant of rights. They said that their relationship is at a crossroads with the ACC. They called out ACC leadership over the past 10 years, really a lot to do with Swafford more than
Yeah.
the guy
Dan
now, than
Phillips. Yeah.
Jim. Yeah. So, but still, it hasn't. Everybody said Jim Phillips was going to be the savior of the ACC, and just we really haven't seen that yet. So,
No.
it is what it is. And so really they got some useful information from Maryland's exit back when they left for the Big Ten. That was something that they said they had some information from. Really their big complaints was the ACC network took so long to roll out, that they were so many years behind the Big Ten network. And of course, the SEC network, which had already been launched around 5 to 7 years before the ACC network was. And then ESPN basically held them hostage to get the extension. And that was the ESPN ultimatum that was mentioned multiple times to be able to get that. And ACC is stuck with the same revenue package for 24 years based on revenue numbers back in 2012. And so that was really a lot of the talking points in this one. And as I kick it to you, I'll say that what they're looking at here is it's $572 million to leave the ACC in 2023. And what they're arguing is the penalty package between the grant of rights and the withdrawal penalty violates Florida law and the antitrust law. And they are proposing that the penalty is unenforceable and it's unjust due to the damages that would be caused. Basically, Florida State leaving the ACC is not going to cost ESPN $572 million in damages. So if it's an unenforceable penalty, they're looking to get that exit fee, that penalty package, either redefined to a lower number or nullified in general to zero. And that's through breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duties, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, and basically violating some of their own bylaws. And so there's a lot that goes into this. It was a 38-page lawsuit, which, by the way, has already been filed.
Yep.
So I think really what you're looking at here, first off, Florida State's going to try, and they filed it in Tallahassee, so they're going to try and keep it in a Florida court. That's a huge, you talk about home field advantage in college football. There's never been bigger home field advantage than this. If you can keep this in Florida, the ACC is cooked. If this goes to North Carolina or federal courts, well, you might be in trouble here.
Right.
But listening to that meeting and watching it, and they had the Florida State attorney on there, really laid it out well. And the more I listened, man, the more I was like, this is going to happen. They're at least, at a minimum, they're at least going to open some doors and do some discovery, which I think is going to give them the keys to start finding evidence to poke holes in this grant of rights.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, I think this, just sets, like I said, Florida State up for the first big step of being able to, eventually exit the conference. They won't be able to do it this year, and most likely not even next year as well. So the earliest they could do is 2025. But what they have to do is they have to begin to lay out the argument for why they feel like the grant of rights is not enforceable. Now, there are a couple from the research I've done, there are a couple different ways you can look at Florida State's aim or end goal. And it's really three options. Either Florida State is just trying to get that number, that $527 million, is trying to get that down to a more manageable range. So right now, the exit fee, withdrawal fees, I think is $120 million. If that was all Florida State had to pay, they'd be gone yesterday, right? Because that's easy, because you can have that go out over time. But if it's, if let's say Florida State could get it down to $300 million, I think that's even more enticing than anything. But that 507 or 27 million, whatever,
572, yeah.
Yes, thank you. $572 million. That's crazy. That's crippling a university. That's shutting down an athletic department. You're not gonna. There's no way, right? And I do think that there is precedent that the lawyers might have seen based on the research that is illegal. That they cannot charge that kind of fee for a school to leave a conference. So I think that's one. I think the other side is that what they would hope is that they're going to file this, like you said, into a court that is local. So probably Leon County, right where they are in Tallahassee, right? And the idea and the hope is to keep it in Florida, because like you said, if it gets to North Carolina, they're screwed. But if they can keep it in a court that's going to be more friendly to them, they could literally, in some ways, win the whole thing. and
Right.
basically the grant of rights be rendered non-void, which means Florida State wouldn't have to pay a dime. They literally just walk on out, like,
Right.
peace, right?
Yeah.
So that's the option. And then the third, which is the one the least likely, hopefully, is that the courts rule in favor of ACC, and now not only is Florida State stuck in the conference, but then they're stuck with the legal fees and all like that stuff. I don't think that's likely. I think if you're asking me today, now as this progresses, it could change. I think the more likely outcome is that as Florida State goes through discovery, as Florida State gets all the information, they start seeing stuff that the ACC. I mean, we talked about this in the pre-show. You were telling me that like the grant of rights, you can only access it at the ACC headquarters. You can't make copies of it. You can't even quote more than one line of it.
They said in the meeting that the only thing they had been able to see, some of the Board of Trustees members, was a copy that was found on the internet from like 2016. And it's just, it's preposterous, man. Like who even does business like this?
No,
Like
it's illegal.
This is some like backdoor of the casino type of business. So they said they said in there that in the meeting that first off, it's located at the ACC headquarters in Charlotte.
Right.
And so you have to go up there to see it. It obviously cannot be moved from there. You're not allowed to make copies. You're not allowed to copy text verbatim. And there's a representative from the conference in there the entire time you're looking at it. So it's in a sense like this is some Indiana Jones type of stuff. You know what I mean? Like trying to get in there to get
the Holy Grail.
Right, exactly. This is some crazy stuff. And so like first off, that right there makes you feel like they got something to hide. And you know, again, people always have to remember that at the end of the day, yes, the ACC is owned by ESPN, and so is the SEC and all these big TV networks. These are all corporations, and it's all about money and shareholders and things like that. They don't care if you're honestly good on the football field or not. They care about what revenue you bring in. And I will say that, like, Florida State did say that they have been trying to figure this out for a long time. They've been trying to work with the ACC, and this is basically the end of the line. They said that this is what the only route they felt like they had left to be able to get any action. That's something that came from the president himself, who, by the way, shout out to President McCullough, called it the CFP Invitational. So my guy, I love it. And so, yeah, man. And then, like, I think when you talk about what Michael Alford said too, and this is something that I'll kind of veer off course for a second, that really makes sense. And this is what we're talking about, why Florida State not only should go through with this, why it makes sense. So Alfred pretty much said that this is a math equation. That's what it comes down to. It's for the best of the school for the future going down the road. And so I have a graphic that I found, and shout out to Genetics56 on Twitter. This guy has been all over this the whole time. It's Big Ten information page on Twitter. He does a really good job of covering this. And I just want to give him credit for the graphic that I'm going to read the numbers off of here. And this is why it makes sense. And this is why what Alfred says makes a lot of sense too. So we know that you're looking at $572 million to get out, or whatever the case may be. So if Florida State can get it down to zero, obviously none of this matters. You're out of here anyway. So the numbers will still be relevant, but you won't have to pay any of it out. So it obviously makes sense. But if you can get that number negotiated down, like we were talking about, 200, 300 million, somewhere in that range. So this is the difference for if Florida State leaves for the Big Ten in revenue over the next few years. We'll do 5 years and 10 years. So Florida State over the first 5 years of being in the Big Ten versus the ACC, you would be plus 207.7 million estimated. Now that's not like you're making 207 million. That's on top of what you would make in the ACC. In the first 10 years, if you know nothing ever went up, the money just stayed the same, you would be projected to make an additional $424.7 million
on top of what they make for the ACC.
On top of that, right? And so, first off, there's really two strong points to take with that. First off, if you don't make that money, the other teams in the country are making that money. So now you're $424 million behind everybody else. Also, the thing is, you know, we're talking about when the grant of rights is 12 to 13 years, depending on when it renews in 2036, you're 12 years out at a minimum. So if you can get that buyout down to, say, let's just say $200-300 million, and over that 10 years, you're still going to be plus $124 million on top of what you're making in the ACC. So you may have to bite the bullet now, like you're seeing some of the other teams do with their, SMU and all these guys that are taking different revenue to come into the conference. You may see where Florida State is like, okay, if we can get it down to 300 million, we can still come out plus 150 million in 12
Yep.
years.
Yep.
We'll finance that over 10
Yeah.
years or 12 years, and we'll pay that off and still be in the positive. And then when the grant of rights is up, not only are we still 150 million ahead in the game, now we're still making 400 and something million more.
Yep.
Plus, when the ACC finally does renegotiate their media rights without Florida State, potentially without Clemson or someone else,
less.
They're going to make less money. So at the end of the day, man, if you're planning on leaving, I mean, there's not really a better time. Sometimes you just got to go for it. And the numbers make sense. And I promise you, and I'll kick it back to you on this. Like when you talk about, we mentioned this in the pre-show, when Thrasher and Coburn, man, they were great guys. They did everything they could for this program when it was in financial trouble.
Yeah.
But Alford and McCullough are more big business, more future focused dogs in leadership. And so if the math equation makes sense, if it's the best thing for the school in the future, you best believe they're going to do it. They're not going to be scared to pull the pin on that. So yeah, man, I just think it's all about the leadership has the what's to go after it now.
That's right. Well, and it's just like you said, like Offer said, this is a math problem. Yep. And here's why this is a math problem. For those of you who are watching this and you're like, I don't understand why they're after all this money. Let me just give you some tangible things. Okay. When you are recruiting against the likes of Georgia, Alabama, LSU, I mean, we'll throw in, look at what Ole Miss is doing in the portal this year. Look at what Ole Miss is doing in the portal. When you're recruiting against Ohio State's, for Jeremiah Smiths, right? You're recruiting against Michigan. These guys they already have right now, just right now in this season alone, they already have almost a $40 million buffer on you. And what does that $40 million go to? You're talking about paying the best coaches, best recruiters, right?
Yep.
You're talking about facilities that attract the best recruits. You're talking about infrastructure. You're talking about recruiting budgets. You're talking about being able to recruit the nation, right? Like all that money that goes into churning out these top programs over and over again.
Yep.
So so when that gap starts to like increase, you're Florida State. You're one of the most iconic brands in the nation. Yes, you're a blue blood of college football, even in your short history. But after 5 to 10 years where you've been 40, 50, 60, 70 million behind those other big programs, you're not going to be that anymore.
Right. And I think the problem is, man, like everybody hates where this is going. Everybody hates it, but it is the game. And at the same time, again, like you talked about, you can say, okay, well, we're Florida State and we're a prestigious program and all that stuff. But if you're making $40 to $50 million less than another program, who's to say that, I don't know, Nebraska doesn't come in with their Big Ten money and say, we're going to pay Mike Norvell $20 million a year to come coach our school. And you're going to say, well, that sounds stupid.
Correct.
Well, they got the money to do it. So who cares?
So they're going to do it. Exactly.
Right. And they're going to do it. And so there's that. And then what if NIL laws change and the schools can get involved in some of these deals and that money can get access? So I think there's 0% that this move doesn't make sense when you just talk about the revenue gap alone. And the ACC is kind of locked into this. So that's the thing, is like they don't really have any maneuverability.
Right.
And it also doesn't benefit ESPN to just all of a sudden hand them more money because they're fussy. You know what I mean? Like you don't give your kids candy because they're mad they don't have candy. Like if they don't need it, they don't need it. So you don't give it to them. So like, they're going to try and grow that SEC brand because it's return on investment. I mean, it is what it is. Like people watch more eyes on TVs in the SEC, and that's why Florida State fits there. But they're not just going to pay these ACC schools because, oh gosh, you added Cal and Stanford, who no one cares about your football program. So they're kind of locked in. So man, I think when you look at the revenue gap, you have to jump. You have to take action.
Well, and then when you look at ESPN, I mean, just go to the ESPN part. Like ESPN's looking at the ACC like, yes, we got into bed with you, ACC, because at the time, Florida State, Clemson, you added Miami, you added Virginia Tech. So those are 4 big brands that we thought would come over, at least Miami and Virginia Tech would come over and add to that. It's going to be great, right? So you signed this grant of rights deal, I think back in 2016 it was, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you thought it was a great thing. But now ESPN's like, holy cow, we are making bank. Now, let's remember, ladies and gentlemen, ESPN. I live in Florida. ESPN is bleeding Disney. It is actually losing money right now, right?
Big
So
time.
ESPN, Disney is going to do whatever it has to do to make ESPN profitable again. The thing that's making ESPN profitable right now is the NFL, the NBA, and the SEC. Okay. Not the ACC. They don't care about the ACC. If you don't believe me, go and watch the last 10 college football invitational top 25 shows. Go and listen to how they talked about the ACC all season long. They did everything in their power to make sure the ACC was disregarded and the SEC was upheld. They influence. They can say they did not, and we're not getting into the whole thing, but they influenced the College Football Invitational Committee around the decision to leave Florida State out. They basically told you the ACC does not matter.
Yeah,
Like
they called
Jesse
it a
said,
so-called Power 5
a
conference.
so-called Power 5 conference. They signed a $3 billion deal with the SEC because they know that's where their money is. So for them, they do not respect the ACC. And if you stay in this conference, you will be an unrespectable former iconic brand of college football.
Right, and when you talk about the Power 3, because the Pac-12 is gone, and once Texas and Oklahoma leave, then the Big
Right.
12 it's kind of a glorified G5 conference at that point.
Correct.
But I mean, when you look at the additions that the Big 10 and the SEC are going to make, you're just going to be so far behind, man.
So
I
far
mean,
behind.
like just with the brands that exist in
Yep.
that conference. And so I
Yep.
think Florida State is going to look to make a move. And something we talked about in the pre-show, I think the interesting thing about this move is if you're opening that can of worms with the ACC that's owned by ESPN, it feels like unless and some people had this crazy tinfoil hat theory where maybe they set you up to get left out of the playoffs so they could open Pandora's box to be able to get this, to let you blow up the ACC, their conference that they don't really care about. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, that's fine too. But at the end of the day, like if you blow up the ACC, you could maybe end up in the SEC. But this really does feel like, and to be fair, before all this came out, everyone pretty much felt like it was going to be the Big Ten anyway.
Big Ten. Yeah.
This is kind of like all signs point to the Big Ten now. Like if you're going to go toe to toe and you're going to go to battle with ACC and the ESPN, feels
Right.
like you're going to pretty much end up with Fox in the Big Ten when all the dust settles. And I will say, I don't want to say too much about this because I can't entirely confirm this. This is mostly just things that I've seen on Twitter. There was some screenshots of official legal paper or work and whatnot, but it does sound like the ACC is also suing the Board of Trustees as well.
I did see that.
So,
yep.
So that is something to look out as well, man. This could be a thing, man. Like this could really be this could really kind of turn ugly during the off season, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. The ACC commissioner did release a statement, which it's good to know that he is still alive. Because,
hey, welcome.
Right, welcome back to the party, buddy. We kind of thought you fell off the face of the earth after the CFP commission or after the CFP scandal or whatever. And so just real quick, he says Florida State's decision to file action against the conference is in direct conflict with their longstanding obligations and is a clear violation of their legal commitments to other members of the conference. All ACC members, including Florida State, willingly and knowingly re-signed the current grant of rights in 2016, which is wholly enforceable and binding through 2036. Each university has benefited from this agreement, receiving millions of dollars in revenue, and neither Florida State nor any other institution has ever challenged its legitimacy. Then he basically goes on to use word salad to say how proud he is as the ACC for being second place in everything.
Yes,
and right, or third place or whatever. The same thing he said at ACC Media Days last year, and the same thing he said the year before that. So basically nothing. But the thing that I find that is important in the statement is, one, they are going to fight back on this. So
of course they
prepare
are.
for that. Of course they're going to. And two, I think that it's interesting that he says that, no one has challenged the legitimacy of this. That doesn't mean that it's not like illegitimate. That just means no one has had the whatever to stand up to the grant of rights yet. And so like that doesn't mean that if Florida State does, I mean, you, like I said, you got this thing like in the hidden temple over here in Charlotte. So, it's like Area 51 for the ACC. I mean, good luck finding the contract.
No noodle running is going to help you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I might have to go on a scavenger hunt. I live close to Charlotte. We'll go see if we can find this sacred document and bust it loose. But no, I think the important thing though, and I'll kick it back to you on this, but I think the important thing out of that is that they kind of just expect Florida State to be able to fall in line
Right.
and it's just kind of status quo for them. But just because no one has ever challenged the legitimacy doesn't mean that Florida State is not going to
Correct.
find a case to do so. And I think it's also some of the arguments that they mentioned at that meeting was, yes, they did sign that agreement. They
Yeah, they did.
wholeheartedly acknowledge that, but they were put in a predicament to sign it when ESPN basically tells you they are not going to extend any media rights until you sign that agreement to
Right.
2036. It was the
Right.
ultimatum that they talked about under basically false pretenses. You had them by the throat. There was nothing they could do. They had to survive. And so, they got a lot of cases. I've heard things even with Swafford didn't want to negotiate a TV contract without Raycom Sports being involved,
Correct.
who like one of his
Correct.
family
Yep.
members or his son was like a
Yes.
board member of
Yes. Yes.
it,
Keep going.
again, man, everybody talks about that CFP stuff and how you're going too deep and it's just a quarterback injury, man. This stuff is way deeper
No,
than people
it's
think it
deeper than
is.
you think. Oh,
Right.
man.
But the ACC did issue a statement. They did open a lawsuit back against the Board of Trustees. So, I mean, it's going to be a fight, and I don't think we're going to find out anything like overnight, especially with the
No.
holidays coming up. They
Yeah.
said they were not looking for an immediate injunction. So they're not like this. They said it won't even show up, which it already has, but it may not even show up on the docket until after Christmas.
Right.
So again, anything legal is going to be a long drawn out process.
Right.
But the
Right.
good thing is if they have more of these meetings, it is open.
Right.
So, we may be able to glean a little bit of information from what they find.
Absolutely. And I don't want anybody out there to panic like, oh gosh, the ACC is suing, Florida State. Like this is not, no. This was expected. Florida State's been working on this game plan for, I'm going to guesstimate maybe more than a year, but what we know about now is a year, right? So they've had time. They've been to Charlotte. They did the treasure hunt. They did the whole national treasure hunt, and they had to get in and, Mission Impossible to just find the grant of rights, and they know what they're doing. So this is expected. And here's the thing, I love his statement at the end. He's like, so it's especially disappointing that Jim Phillips and it's especially disappointing that FSU would choose to pursue this unprecedented and overreaching approach. What do you mean? What do you mean it's disappointing? You think Florida State has any allegiance to the ACC? You think Alabama or Georgia, if the SEC was screwing them, would have any allegiance to the SEC? No, their only allegiance, that FSU board of directors allegiance, is to FSU. That is it. And now they're looking at their situation saying, if we don't get out of this terrible second-rate, third-rate, fourth-rate conference, we are no longer going to be at the pinnacle of college football. No longer. We have to look out for ourselves. So for Jim Phillips and Jim Ryan to call this disappointing, like, come on, dude, this is business. We standing on business right now.
Right. And the thing is, like, they said that in the meeting. They said, like, look, our first and foremost duty is to do what's best for Florida State University. Point blank, period. That's it. And so that's how they're going to act. They don't, I mean, first off, what has the ACC ever given them reason to feel sad for them? I mean, look at the officiating that we get already. God. So yeah, I think that is very much an important mindset to keep here, that Florida State doesn't care if this crashes the whole party.
Yep.
And I think you also have to think of it too, like, yeah, okay, you might get some screwed on some calls or something like that. That's probably it happens anyway. At the end of the day, what are you going to lose? They're not going to kick you out of the ACC. And if they do, that was our goal in the first place.
That was our goal in the first place.
Exactly. So it's really, there's no lose-lose in this. I mean, they're going to get pissed off and be like, all right, we're tired of you. You're out of here. Yeah. Thank you. So like, that's what we want in the first place. So there's really nothing to lose here other than it's just going to be a little bit awkward at, around conference meetings and those meetings in Amelia Island. There might be some tables flipped and some chairs thrown. There might be some awkward looks. But at the end of the day, there's no lose for Florida State in this one, because you either find the information you need to do the best thing for Florida State, or you're still in the same position that you were last year.
I'm just imagining,
if they lose, you're still in the same position that you were. Nothing changed.
Absolutely. I'm just imagining. I'm sorry. I'm just imagining Mike Norvell walking into those meetings. Just, how he got that eye and he's just staring them down, like
that killer look.
Like what?
How he's gonna look at them like he looks at Mario Cristobal. But no, I think it's true, man. Like I feel like Florida State has a pretty good case here to at least discover some information. And
absolutely,
people will talk about the 12-team playoff and how it kind of cures all with this, but that's not exactly the case, because okay, so you get the automatic bid if you're the conference champion. But you're, in a sense, with what you did this year in the CFP, you're basically telling Florida State, like, hey, look, if you want to make the 12-team playoff, you have to win your conference every year. You're not telling that to the second or third place SEC team or the second or third place Big Ten team, who are probably going to get a majority of the spots in the playoff.
Yep.
If you are viewed as a second-rate conference compared to the Power Two, who are now going to be even bigger with more teams, they're going to fill up those playoff spots. And it may come to where an 11-1 ACC team gets bumped for a 10-2 Big Ten or SEC team or something like that with a similar record because of the conference that they play in. And at the end of the day, again, you have to tie all this back to success on the field. One, that is important, but because that is in the ACC bylaws too, that they will give their conference members an equal opportunity to compete for championships, which again, you didn't this time.
You did not.
And so, like, it also comes back to revenue, because now you're going to have another team that won't be getting that chunk of playoff money that gets split between everybody. So, yeah, man, again, at the end of the day, like, just because you get a 12-team playoff, yeah, you could get that automatic bid in there. You may not, if you win the conference, you may not ever get left out again.
Yeah.
But if you're number 2 in the conference and you're getting left out for potentially the number 3 or 4 Big Ten or SEC team, you're still at a competitive disadvantage, which also leaves you at a financial disadvantage when you talk about merchandise sales and TV money and all that stuff from the playoffs. So, and that's what's got them so mad this year, because Florida State lost, what did they say, $2+ million on this deal?
Yes, on this deal, on getting screwed out of the invitation. Okay, keep count. I'm gonna read you these top 25 teams. I want you to keep count of how many are SEC, how many are Big Ten, future or not, and how many are everybody else. All right, here we go. Michigan, Big Ten. Washington, future Big Ten. Texas, future SEC. Alabama, SEC. Florida State, right now, ACC. Georgia, SEC. Ohio State, Big Ten. Oregon, future Big Ten. Missouri, SEC. Penn State, Big Ten. Ole Miss, SEC. Oklahoma, future SEC. That's just the top 12. How many of them were not Big Ten or SEC? One. Okay. I'm not done. Hold on a second. Who was number 13? LSU, SEC. Arizona, Pac-12. I think they're moving over to the Big 12, so don't really count. LSU 15 with Louisville, ACC. Notre Dame, independent. Iowa, Big Ten. NC State, ACC. Oregon State, they're going to be in like the WAC, I think. Oklahoma State, Big 12. Tennessee, SEC. Clemson, ACC. Liberty, don't know. SMU, future ACC. Kansas State, Big 12. Tell me, in those top 12, going to a 12-team playoff, if Florida State, let's say Florida State's 10-2 and LSU is 10-2, Florida State is 12, LSU's 13. You're telling me that based on what you saw this year, you would trust the committee to put Florida State in over LSU or over a Big Ten team? No, I wouldn't. No. So that's why it matters.
Right. And I will say, too, like when you look at the additions that everybody's making, you're adding, the Big Ten's adding Oregon, who, my goodness, what Dan Lanning's building a machine up there, son. He's got more 5-star quarterbacks than he knows what to do with.
I know. Like play both at the same time.
I say you might run like a wishbone package or something with 2 5-star quarterbacks in there. But you look at that. You look at Washington, who's obviously having a lot of success right now. And then you talk about USC, who's obviously a big brand and doing some things as well, too. But anyway, long story short, when you think about adding SMU, who was the other team that you mentioned that will be a future ACC member that was ranked, that actually had a pretty good year in football.
Right. Yeah.
The problem is they're relinquishing like their entire revenue or whatever from coming into the ACC. They're giving all of it up. So you are not really going to see, and this is something that we just talked about and I encourage you guys to go watch the Let's Talk About Strength of Schedule episode, because it talks a lot about why the ACC was more competitive than the CFP committee gave them credit for.
Right.
But I think the important thing there is, like we talked about this with the Big 12, 4 of their teams that came into the Big 12 were former G5 teams, and they all finished 500 or below this year. So like that extra money that you're getting is going to take a few years to pay off before you actually see them transition into more of a Power 5 team, from facilities, recruiting budgets, staffs, etc. So if you have the SMU coming to the ACC and they're basically giving up their entire revenue share, how much growth do you expect from SMU?
Right.
If Cal and Stanford, who were both getting Power 5 money before, both still aren't any good, and now I think they're taking a 66% revenue share or something like that, how much better do you expect them to get? So the problem is, again, man, the ACC is just not going – they're just not going to get better out of a poof of smoke because you've had so many schools that have not taken football seriously for such a long time. And now I think you have some brands that, Syracuse is looking like they got, God knows they got beat 45-0 by South Florida last night. Now,
Man,
I
now
think
they
they
had a
had like
tight end playing quarterback.
I was about to say,
but,
and they didn't have their coach.
Yeah,
there was a lot of, like, the long snapper was probably their running back or something. It was a mess for them, but they got absolutely
hammered.
pulverized. But they got some good recruits up there. They
Yeah,
did some
yeah.
things with their new coach from Georgia, and then Virginia Tech had a pretty good recruiting haul too. So you got some teams that are getting better, but man, it's just not the same conversation when
Yeah,
you talk about adding
absolutely.
Oregon and Washington and Texas and Oklahoma versus the teams that Florida State
You know
or
what
the
it's like,
ACC added.
Jesse?
It's not the same conversation,
You know what
man.
it's like? That's like us owning a business, right? And Coke comes in, Coca-Cola. They come in and they say, "Hey, we can offer you this product. You pay this, you're gonna get this, right?" And you're like, "Man, that's Coke, right?" So you're willing to pay more. And then like RC Cola comes in and tries to charge you the same
Yeah,
price. You're like,
right.
"No,
Who are you anyway?
who are you? I'm
Right.
not paying for that."
Right, and I think from just a competitive standpoint on the field and a eyes on the TV numbers, you're obviously not bringing in near the growth that
Right.
the other conferences are. And so I think the important thing to talk about with that is just, again, going back to the 12-team playoffs and the issues that are still going to be present. And you talk about the long-term conversation. We already talked about the money difference that you
Right.
can get from going to the Big Ten. And by the way, the Big Ten is paying the most right now for those who don't want to
More
go to
than
the
the
Big Ten.
SEC. Thank
Hey,
you.
look, I'll take that extra money and buy an extra jacket, and
Heck yeah.
I'll sit through the call, I'll shiver a little bit.
Yeah.
But maybe we can take the extra money
Let's
and I don't
go.
know, everybody can build a dome or something. But at the same time, man, I just think when you talk about the long term, when you do hit 2036 and you finally get out of the grant of rights, like
Yeah.
the ACC's negotiating chips are not going to be
No.
that of the Big Ten or the SEC still. So even if you were to have to wait this out, and you're like, okay, they added some teams, we'll see what happens. These teams aren't bringing anything,
Right.
and so
Correct.
that I think that's the problem. Is like you already had kind of a grim long-term outlook, and then you added basically 3 dead fish to the barrel, and
Correct.
it did nothing for the conference. And so
It's a good
I
analogy.
I just really do think that regardless of you may be angry about what happened with the CFP, but again, we talked about this. This has been going on for way longer than that
Yeah,
happened.
yeah. It's been much deeper than that.
It's a long-term deal. When you look
Yep.
at 10, 20, 30 years down the road, and the board of trustees is not they're not paid to go get the best player out of the transfer portal in
Correct.
2024. They're paid to look 20 years into the future at the
Yes.
best interest of Florida State. And
Yes.
that is what this is all about, is securing the
Your
future.
future.
We just said it. In 10 years, just the estimate would be an additional
My
almost
goodness.
$500 million in
Dollars.
TV revenue. So to me, there's literally zero question that you've done everything you could do, and now you've reached a point where a legal standpoint is the only action left to take.
Yep.
And it just makes sense, and it becomes a math equation, and I don't see why they shouldn't do it. So,
Ye
that's really, to me, what it kind of all boils down to is you just have to do the best interest for your, for the university, its long-term future. And if that means, kind of upsetting the apple cart a little bit on the way out the door, it
Right.
is what it is, man.
Yep.
Like you said, we're not here to support the ACC. We're here to support Florida State, and so that's really the ultimate goal for the board of trustees, and I think they make the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, I really do. I agree too as well. Like, I just think that because here's the thing, if you've been following college football for some time and you've been following the whole realignment stuff, you can kind of put on your like future glasses and see like we're not done. Like college, this is going to end up. We are looking at probably in 10 years from now a college football structure that looks very similar to the NFL, where you have these two major leagues. The regionality of it is going to come back. I actually believe the regionality of college football is going to come back, but it's going to be very much like the NFL, where you're going to play these big conference, in your conference, you're going to have this playoff. That's how you're going to determine. It has to be, because the way it's going right now, it's going to
Crash.
implode. It's going to implode on itself. It can't,
Yep.
This cannot be a sustainable model the way we keep shifting on this. So it's going to land somewhere where there's going to be regionality. There's going to be two major conferences. You're going to play those people. It's going to look just like the NFL. It's going to be basically the minor league of the NFL. Basically, it's what's going to happen with
the
schools.
G League.
The G League, basically, with schools involved, basically. That's what I think. And if you're looking at, okay, Well, why doesn't Florida State just hold on to that point? Then it'll all end up anyways. Because then when you get to that point, you're now 10 years and $500 million behind in revenue that
Billion.
you won't be able. Think about that. We've said it. $500 million behind in revenue that you won't be able to even catch up. You'll be the Nebraska of college football again. I mean, Nebraska's been obsolete for 20 plus years. Why? Because they never could catch up. Now, they had all the money and resources in the world. It wasn't money. It's just where they're located. But man, when college football changed to the spread offense and all like that, they did not adapt. They kept doing what they would do. And now look at them. They're trying to catch up, but it's going to be nearly impossible. Look at the University of Miami. They haven't been relevant for 20 years because they're just a terrible school and a terrible program. Nothing's going to help them. They're trash anyways. But the point is,
they're a lost cause.
They're a lost cause. They're done.
Don't worry about it. The point
is that you do not want to wake up 10 years from now and say, oh, look, we can finally get out of this thing. And then look and see all of those other schools, the Alabama, the Georgias, the University of Florida, who's literally in your backyard, Miami, well, not Miami, but, Florida, all those big name schools, they're 10 years ahead of you in revenue and in development and all like that stuff when you could have been out 10 years ago. This is why now is the time to start this process so that in the next couple of years, you're out of this conference. And you quoted the Genetics 56 guy. I think he's very reputable. This guy knows a lot. He has been spot on in his predictions. So if you're watching, man, kudos to you. But he has said, and I'm just quoting what he said. I'm not saying we know for sure, but he has said that there's been a private offer to Florida State to join the Big Ten. It's theirs for the taking. So if it's there and Florida State, that's what they're going to get because the SEC is being a bunch of babies right now, then dude, let's go. Like you said, right now, the current projection is that over the next couple years, that Big Ten will dole out $100+ million per school per year, whereas the SEC is somewhere between 80 and 90 million per school per year. Yeah, I think I want that 100 million. Like you said, I'll go buy a parka if I got to go sit at Michigan State.
And I think I saw in a tweet where the ACC delivered like 39 million or something like that last year. So I mean, just that gap is almost insurmountable at some point.
Yes.
And that's the thing. Like people have to remember, you still have to compete against Florida, whether or not Miami's getting that money or not. Because Florida. Miami, you can give them all the recruits, all the money, all the facilities, they're still going to suck. It's just it's in their DNA, right? So like. They're probably sitting by loving this because they're hoping us and Clemson make it out and the ACC turns back into the Big East so they can finally win something again. You know what I mean? Because it's been 20 years of trying, and I'm sorry, guys. The only time you sniffed it, you got beat by 5 touchdowns. So
that's right.
Hey, don't be mad at me. Be mad at the facts. But at the end of the day, man, like I still think too. You have to, if you get in the playoffs, you're competing, like you said, against those teams that are making that extra money. And so you got to get out now so you can stay on that in the arms race that is college football. And, I know people will say, well, you just went 13-0 without the money. Yeah, but the revenue gaps are still, they're noticeable, obviously, in your facilities and your recruiting budgets and things like that they're starting to show up. The gap is starting to get wide.
Yep.
But this is a 5 to 10 year plan where you're going to go from being 20 to 30 to now 40 to 50 to 60 million. And then, that compounds over time when you don't have that much to spend. So it already looks rough, but it's going to get worse over time. And like you said, man, I think hopefully at the end of the day, hopefully it all kind of comes back to the center again at some point, because I mean, you got to adapt with the times. And that's something that you mentioned, but I think for a lot of us that are, 30 plus years old, whatever. And I think it does make you long for the old days of the game.
It really does.
Where it's like, man, things were like people played in bowl games and you understand why they don't. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't. And I don't think kids should get, I'm not arguing that kids should get paid. But it's like when I was talking to someone earlier that we were mentioning about the whole recruiting day flips and things like that, because he's a Georgia fan. And we're talking about the whole KJ Bolden situation. And it's like, can you be mad at the kid for taking money when the coach would do the same thing? Can you be mad at the coach for taking money when the team is moving conferences to do the same thing? Like everybody's after money. money has just kind of killed the purity that was college football.
Yep.
But it is what it is now, and you have to adapt or die, and you have to keep up with that, and that's really what Florida State is trying to do right now. And I can at least say that I have heard. I can't say anything who or where or what, and I'm not like some freaking insider, so don't take this. But I have heard too that there has been a silent offer from the Big Ten, and they played a little bit off of maybe the SEC to see how much they could get. So I don't think Florida State would be doing this unless they knew there was a landing spot for them when they made it out. Because if that buyout goes to zero, they're out the next day.
Like that.
So, and I think it's going to be the Big Ten. So I think they pretty much know. Yeah. I know they had mentioned like, oh, well, even if it's the Big 12, I don't think that's going to be the move.
I don't think that's an option. No.
When you lose Texas and Oklahoma, that money's going to dwindle down. So I don't think that's an option. I think it's pretty much all signs point to the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And so it's really now it's just a matter of how long it takes and can they find enough to make it financially feasible, to make that math equation work out to where they can make the jump into the Big Ten.
Absolutely.
For revenue reasons.
Well, yeah. And I would just say this, like, I think something that was so key that I didn't even think about that you brought up in our pre-show that I think is worth mentioning here is the last argument, and not that we're needing to make arguments to you guys, because we know you're all in favor of this just as we are too. But the last thing you have to understand is this. There has already been, the NCAA has already come out and said that they are exploring the possibility of allowing schools to be more involved in the collectives in the NIL scene, meaning that schools will potentially be able to pay players. Now, the way they're talking about it is like they'll have to put it in savings, whatever. That's probably not going to happen. They're going to get to a point where schools are actually able to pay directly to the players. If there was ever any argument around this revenue gap, that is it right there. Because now you got the SEC and the Big Ten being able to pay astronomical dollars to get the best players in the country.
Yeah, and let's face it too, man, like this model, the current model is unsustainable. It's just not like you can't keep expecting private donors to just keep funneling millions upon millions into college football rosters. Like there's just not the return on investment. Like if you wanted to have Trey Benson go to Jesse's car lot, on Capitol Circle in Tallahassee and do an ad for me for $1,000, $5,000 or something, that's one thing. But if you're paying a kid $1 million at a quarterback position to come in and play, and he might do a couple of meetings here and there, handshakes and things like that, the return on investment is going to eventually dry up. And so I think it is going to eventually have to go to like that, like you mentioned, where the schools pay the players. I think that is probably going to have to be the future because there's going to have to be some guardrails put on this eventually.
Absolutely.
And you just don't want to find yourself at a $400 million disadvantage when you talk about people are wanting to cancel Battles and subscriptions because we didn't sign one guy. Like imagine when you're $500 million in the hole. Like everybody's gonna be pissed.
Absolutely. And so you bring up a great point. Like the thing is, these collectives, while they're great now and they're working and the Battles In is done a phenomenal job, man, they are not a long-term solution to this NIL problem. They're not. What's going to be, or not problem, but situation, what's going to be the long-term solution is the NCAA granting universities the ability to pay the players. That's where we're at. That's where, when they opened up this can of worms, and listen, I've been in favor of players being paid. I mean, why not? It's $1 billion for they're the ones risking their bodies. But when they opened up this can of worms, this is the long-term trajectory that private donors like you and me, we can't sustain paying these kids. I mean, we were paying the boosters so they could build facilities and all like that stuff. Now we're paying the boosters and we're paying Battles In to play the players and we're paying for coaches. Like, man, I don't know about you, but I don't make that much money.
I know.
And these $1 million, $1 billion, or these $1 million donors who can donate that kind of money, they want to, they can't do this forever. They can't do this in perpetuity. So at some point, this is going to fall to the university to be able to play it. Now, we all know what that worm's going to look like, because once the schools start paying the players, now you open yourself up to players become employees. They're going to unionize. I mean, you can see where this is headed, right? Like it is there, and that's where we're headed. And so the thing is, you don't want to be, again, $500 million behind the 8 ball when this does come to fruition.
Yep. No, I agree, man. It's just like, I think a lot of people who are not involved with Florida State have a very short-term view of what Florida State's trying
Correct.
to do, and I think
Correct.
they think it's just, oh, they're pissed because they're mad, they're throwing a tantrum because they got left out of the playoffs and this, that, and the other. Man, again, this is something where Florida State is looking 10 to 20 to 30 years in advance, and they're trying to do whatever they can do to put themselves in the best position to compete at the high level in the future. We know they can compete now. We get that, but they want to be able to be on a level footing with all the other programs in the Power 2 conferences. And again, you just really don't even know what the ACC is going to look like by 2036 with all the expansion and all that stuff, and they could be lapped multiple times in revenue. And so, yeah, man, it's just, and I think on top of that, as we'll wind down here in just a second, I think too that when you look at the ACC as a whole,
Yeah.
you just really have not had strong leadership for a long time that goes to bat for you. That's a lot of where they talk about the breach of fiduciary duties,
Yep.
where they are supposed to look out for these schools and to be able to maximize the revenue, and they're just not doing it. They're not doing
Yep.
their job. I mean, you saw Greg Sankey from the SEC. He's always on TV politicking for his
Oh
conference. You
yeah.
never
Oh
see
yeah.
that from the
No.
ACC. And so
No.
I think it's just like, it's not only are you trying to put yourself in a revenue gap or fix the revenue gap by going to another conference, but like you'd probably feel better if you were in a conference that had strong enough forward thinking leadership to know that in the future you're going to be taken care of. Because again, you can see where they're forward looking in those two conferences. And you can see where the ACC kind of really made a reactionary move, adding those three teams that didn't really add a lot of value. So you just don't see the bright future that you like. You can see the yellow brick road in the Big Ten that leads to a pot of gold down the way. Like you can
Yeah.
tell they have forward thinking leadership. They went out and they got Oregon and Washington, USC and UCLA, all these nice brands. They're bringing them in. They're doing all these things. They're, Fox is building up, taking all the talent from ESPN. They got
Yep.
all the media personalities and stuff like that now. So you can see where their future is bright and your future is locked into a terrible rate.
Yep.
And also, you don't know what's going to happen whenever you finally get to the end of that contract. So I think, like you said, man, there's no point in waiting. If you're going to blow this thing up, do it now and put yourself in the best position for the future.
And here's what's crazy. This is a man. This discovery stuff is so good because right now it has been just discovered that ESPN's this contract, the grant of rights, right? We've been told forever that it runs through 2036 and that's where it is and all that stuff. For the ACC side of the grant of rights, yes. So Florida State's locked into that thing till 2036. But ESPN is only locked into 2027.
Really?
Yes, they just released it. Like I'm looking at it right now. ESPN is only locked into the contract until 2027. And then ESPN and ESPN alone only has the right to extend the unilateral 9-year option.
So then your future is really not guaranteed at all.
Correct. That's the other side of it.
Exactly. Yeah,
and
man.
So,
you're
like,
gonna
yeah,
see some things come out. Like this is
crazy.
This is literally the point of the lawsuit is discovery, because we talked about how under lock and key they keep things in the ACC.
Yep.
This is what it's all about. This is about just kicking the door open and being able to look for things. And that antitrust suit does that. And, you have basically the entire Florida political system on your side.
Correct.
So if you keep it in Florida, you're going to be in good shape. And, man, you're going to probably see some shady things like this come out. And I think it's every little bit of this that comes out is going to be ammo in the arsenal of Florida State.
Man, just think about this. ESPN could literally just say, and 2026, hey guys, we're not renewing this deal in 2020 after 2027. And then like FSU,
you're in the Pac-12's position where you have no one, you're having to shop around your media rights,
and nobody wants it,
and nobody's going to
want it for nothing, basically.
Right, exactly. And you're not going to be in a strong bargaining position.
Oh my goodness! Wow,
you're in trouble. Yeah, and they could renegotiate you at whatever rate, because that's what again, that's essentially what dissolved the Pac-12 is they thought they were worth something. Nobody wanted to pay it. Eventually, they got so far down the asking price that half the teams were like, "We're out of here, dude.
Yeah.
We're going."
I mean, I think the best price they got was from Apple, which was like $26 million a team.
Yeah,
it's like, are you kidding me?
Right. And so you could, I mean, that very well could be something where like I mean, the ACC could get picked up by a streaming network or something like Apple TV, like you said, Amazon, with the NFL deals that they're doing and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's a big one, man. That's like
huge.
your future is not guaranteed, and you're talking about 4 years from now. That's not
Well,
long at all. Well, 3 years
this,
maybe. So.
Yeah, this is why this for you guys watching, this is why this has to happen now. This is why Florida State's taking this step. Probably what they'll end up doing is they'll file this lawsuit in Leon County. Just to recap, they just want to try to get a judge to rule that this contract, this grant of rights, is not enforceable. Florida ACC is countersuing in the same way that it is enforceable. And the idea that what I'm assuming FSU is trying to do is they're trying to get the ACC and the basically ESPN to the table to say, look, if we go through this, it's going to cost each of us millions and millions of dollars, and we'll end up right here anyways negotiating an exit fee. So let's come to the table. Let's begin negotiating this exit fee, because if we end up winning, you're going to get nothing, right?
Yep.
And that's the risk you take. There's no risk on us. I mean, if we lose, we'll just be stuck in this thing, and we'll lose some millions of dollars for a couple million for the legal fees. That's nothing. But if you lose, man, you're out. Whatever much money you want to say. So
exactly. And I mean, if you think about it, and this is just the truth, like if you have and I know this because I've worked for a corporation for a long time. Like if you were to have something where it would go to court, 99.99, 110% of the time, they're going to settle out of court for a settlement.
Correct.
They're going to say, this is not worth our time going to court.
Correct.
Here's a check, go away. And so you're right, man. It literally could just get to where you're trying to get them to come to the table and say, listen, we're going to just keep doing what we're doing. If we stay in the ACC, it is what it is. We're not losing anything here, but you stand to lose a lot more than we do.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
In theory, of course, now you're going to lose a lot of money too by not getting out, but you're still going to be competing at the same level that you were beforehand. So you stand to gain more, they stand to lose more.
Yep.
And so I think it's just a weird position where maybe you could come together on agreement, like Alfred said, in a math equation that makes sense for Florida State to be able to pull the trigger on that. So I think that's really where it is. And once you get through this discovery phase, man, you're going to see some things that are probably going to be head scratching.
Man,
probably frustrating when you see things that come out that you're like, who in the HE double hockey sticks was in charge of this stuff? You know what I mean? These guys, like, where did you get your degree from? Yeah. So you're going to probably see some shady stuff in some of these contracts and things like that. But I think that is, again, the point in doing this is to be able to shed light on all these things so everybody can at least be on a fair ground when you go to do battle in the courtroom about who's right and who's wrong. You at least know what you're working with. And so it's going to be an interesting couple of months, man. Like you said, it was till August 15th when they have to let them know that. And I jokingly say that because August 15th is my birthday. So I keep waiting.
Happy birthday.
I keep telling everybody I'm waiting for a big birthday present. Wink, wink.
So nice.
A B1G birthday present. That's what I'm waiting for.
That's right. Let's go.
We'll see. I mean, you got one more year in the ACC. That's pretty much going to happen unless this thing, unless it really does turn ugly and they just boot you out. But you got one more year, but it's going to be the next couple of months are going to be interesting because this is going to be where, it kind of has to hit the table and you're going to have to see like we're either in or we're out by August. So it's going to be interesting, man. We'll keep you guys posted as things break. If there's any new news that is worth talking about, we'll kind of provide updates on shows that we do because, we are going to the off season. So this will probably be this in the portal will be the hot topic going soon because, players going to hit the portal. Florida State might hit the portal. You never know, man. So we'll see. It's funny if you guys are watching this and you follow us on social media, go check it out. I actually just dropped a portal graphic for Florida State entering the transfer portal. Just decided to have some fun with this, so it's pretty funny. So you guys go check that out.
Hey, and if you find it, you guys, you'll see it. It's on Plant the Spirits on Instagram, Twitter, all like that. Repost it, share it. It's so good. It's a great laugh. We haven't had a lot of great laughs, in the last month as a Florida State fan. So appreciate Jesse for going and making this graphic. It's hilarious. So repost it, share it, retweet it, whatever you do there. Give some other Florida States just a little laugh for Christmas.
Yeah, a little something to smile about after these last few months. But we do appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, I want to bring you. I know I always wait to do it to the end of the show, so I feel bad. I'm sorry, guys, but at least I didn't forget. A word from our sponsor, Alumni Hall FSU. They have all the gear that you need for Florida State. If you're looking for a last-minute Christmas gift and you're in Tallahassee, swing by 1817 Thomasville Road. They have extended hours for holidays, so you can get all your shopping done. Use code SPEAR to get 10% off, or you can shop online, alumnihall.com. Navigate over to the Florida State page, pick out your gear, get 10% off with code SPEAR. We thank you guys for supporting those that support us. So
yeah, you can send that to Jim Phillips. He needs some FSU gear. He's feeling
oh
a little
man,
lonely right now. Go
he
ahead and
would
just
love
fill
that.
his whole inbox with gear from Alumni Hall. Get 10% off. Let's do that.
That's a great. Everybody go to Alumni Hall and go find something Florida State and mail it to Jim Phillips, because I'm sure he would
Yes,
love that as a Christmas.
he would love it.
I'm sure he would love that. That would be hilarious. That's a great idea. And use code SPIRIT to get 10% off while you're
That's
at
right.
it. So, but most definitely, guys, we appreciate you guys tuning in. It was just kind of, we wanted to bring our thoughts to you guys on this. Like we said, we're not any legal professionals, so
Nope.
it doesn't have any kind of legal standing or anything like that. Just kind of our thoughts on the process. But we will be back with you guys coming up next week. Obviously, Monday is Christmas, so we hope all of you guys have a Merry Christmas out there and a great holiday season. We will be back with you to preview. I don't know what you want. Maybe
Oh
like
man,
the orange peel bowl, because
the
there's nothing
orange
inside
peel.
of the orange. Like there,
That's
I don't know,
right.
man. I think they might let me play a few snaps if I show up in South Florida, because I don't know. I don't know. We don't have many guys left, but
Yeah.
we're still going to play the game, so we're going to stop.
Yeah.
We're still going to talk about it. So we'll be back with you guys for an Orange Bowl preview coming up, and of course, like we said, we'll provide any other updates in the transfer portal or in the development of this case. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for tuning in, and as always,
Always.
go
Go
Noles.
Noles.